This isn't a story I heard from a friend of a friend, something that happened to someone else. This is my story. It happened to my family, and it's the reason we'll never be whole again. My brother, Leo, with a smile that could sell sand in the desert, slid a glossy, professionally bound portfolio across the mahogany dining table and announced that our grandmother's entire life savings, all $780,000 of it, was now invested in something called quantum ape coin. He sat back beaming, as if he'd just gifted us all the keys to a private kingdom, while the polished wood reflected the terrified whites of my eyes. He hadn't just made a risky investment. He detonated a bomb in the center of our lives, and I was the only one who seemed to hear the ticking. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. It had started a year earlier, under the guise of love and responsibility. Our grandmother, Eleanor, was a pillar of strength who had begun to crumble. At 84, her mind, once a steel trap of recipes, family history, and sharp opinions, was becoming a labyrinth. Patches of fog would roll in, stealing names and memories. The diagnosis was early-stage dementia, a gentle term for a cruel thief. The family consensus was that she needed to move into a high-end assisted living facility in La Jolla, a beautiful place overlooking the Pacific where she could be safe and cared for. The cost was astronomical, but Grandma Eleanor was prepared. She and my grandfather, a firefighter who had passed a decade prior, had been meticulous savers. They had lived a modest life in a small house in Claremont, funneling every spare dollar into a nest egg designed for this exact purpose, to ensure her final years were spent in dignity, not as a burden. That $780,000 wasn't just money. It was a lifetime of calloused hands, double shifts, and skipped vacations. It was her final fortress of independence, and Leo wanted the keys. The conversation happened in the same dining room, at the same table. "We need someone to manage her portfolio," my father had said, his brow furrowed with a manufactured sense of gravity. "The market's complex these days." "I can do it," Leo chimed in instantly, his voice smooth as silk. He was 28, 7 years my junior, and worked for some nebulous fintech startup in the Gaslamp Quarter. He wore expensive sneakers, spoke in a dizzying torrent of acronyms like DeFi and NFT, and carried himself with the unshakable confidence of a man who had never truly failed at anything. To our parents, he wasn't just their son. He was a visionary, their ticket to feeling modern and relevant. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Leo, no offense, but this is Grandma's life savings. It needs to be in stable, low-risk investments. We should hire a professional fiduciary, a neutral third party." My mother waved her hand dismissively, a gesture she'd perfected over 35 years of marriage. "Oh, Clara, don't be so dramatic. Why would we pay a stranger when we have Leo? He understands this new economy." "What new economy?" I pressed. "He's talking about assets with no intrinsic value. Grandma needs security, not a lottery ticket." Leo chuckled, a condescending little sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Clara, it's cute that you're still thinking in terms of CDs and bonds. That's boomer talk. You have to be aggressive to get ahead of inflation. Do you want Grandma's money to just sit there and rot?" He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "I can double it. Maybe even triple it. We could be talking about a legacy here." He had them hooked. The idea of not just preserving the money but multiplying it was too seductive for my parents to resist. They saw dollar signs, a testament to their brilliant son's genius. I saw a predator licking its chops. I argued, pleaded, and laid out the risks, but it was 3 against 1. My words were treated as the jealous ramblings of the older, less successful sibling. I was the practical, boring accountant, while Leo was the financial messiah. A week later, they had a lawyer draft the paperwork, and Leo was granted full power of attorney over Eleanor's finances. The fox was officially in charge of the henhouse. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. Leo would send out cheerful, jargon-filled emails with screenshots of an app showing impressive gains. QAC is up 15% this quarter. Told you guys Grandma would be set for life, one email read. My parents would forward it to me with a smug C attached. When I'd visit Grandma at her beautiful, sun-drenched facility, she seemed content. She loved the garden and the scheduled activities, and for a while, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong. Maybe Leo really did have the Midas touch. The illusion began to crack 6 months later. I got a call from a woman named Maria, the administrator at the facility. Her tone was polite but firm. Hi, Clara. I'm calling because your mother's payment for this month is 10 days past due. We just need to know when we can expect it. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Past due? That's impossible. The payments are on auto draft. The last draft was rejected for insufficient funds, she said, and my blood ran cold. We tried contacting your brother, as he's listed as the financial POA, but we haven't been able to reach him. I hung up and immediately called Leo. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice breezy and annoyed. What's up, Clara? I'm in the middle of something. I could hear the clinking of glasses and loud music in the background. The facility called. They said Grandma's payment was rejected. There was a slight pause. Yeah, just a transfer delay, he said dismissively. The crypto exchange is upgrading their withdrawal protocols. It's a security thing. Annoying but standard. I'll handle it. Tell them not to get their panties in a twist. Leo, this is serious. They need to be paid. And they will be, he snapped, his patience gone. God, you need to relax. The market is just consolidating before the next bull run. Everything is fine. He hung up before I could say another word. But everything was not fine. The phrase consolidating before the next bull run was a classic crypto bro deflection, a meaningless platitude meant to shut down questions. I transferred money from my own savings to cover the late payment, telling the facility it was a one-time banking error. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the beginning. The bomb was still ticking, and the fuse was getting shorter. I had to find out what was really going on with Grandma's money, even if it meant proving my own family were fools, and my brother was a monster. My investigation started with a lie. The following weekend, I visited Grandma, bringing her favorite lemon poppy seed muffins. She was having a lucid day, her eyes clear and focused. We sat on her small balcony overlooking the ocean, the salt-laced breeze rustling the potted geraniums. I told her I was helping a friend organize her late husband's estate and was confused by some of the old paperwork. You and Grandpa were always so organized, I said gently. Would you mind if I looked at some of your old files? Just to see how you structured things. She patted my hand, a flicker of her old, sharp self in her eyes. Of course, dear. In the little filing cabinet by the desk. Your grandfather kept everything. It felt awful, using her dementia against her, but the alternative, letting Leo drain her accounts dry, was infinitely worse. In the bottom drawer of the cabinet, beneath dusty insurance policies and old tax returns, I found what I was looking for. A Bank of America statement from just over a year ago, before Leo had taken control. It showed a balance of $782,451.37. I took a photo of it with my phone, my hands trembling slightly. This was my baseline, my proof of what had been there. The next Monday, I walked into a Bank of America branch in UTC, miles from my parents' neighborhood. I approached a teller, a kind-faced woman in her 50s named Patricia. I explained that I was concerned about my elderly grandmother. I told her I suspected she might be the victim of financial fraud, and that her son, my brother, who had power of attorney, was being evasive. I showed her my ID and a copy of my grandmother's birth certificate to prove our relationship. I knew they couldn't give me full access, but I was banking on a flicker of human decency. I can't show you the account details without a court order, honey, Patricia said, her voice full of sympathy. But given the circumstances, I can confirm a few things. Was there a specific transaction you were worried about? A large one, I said, my heart pounding. About 11 months ago. A wire transfer, she typed for what felt like an eternity. Her expression soured. She looked up at me, her eyes dark with pity. There was a wire transfer for $780,000 11 months ago, she confirmed quietly. To an entity called Coinbase Global. The number hit me like a physical blow. 780,000. He'd moved everything. Not a portion, not a test amount, all of it. In one fell swoop, is there anything else? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Patricia hesitated, then leaned forward. This is off the record, she murmured, but the account has had multiple insufficient funds notices in the last 2 months. The current balance is not enough to cover a cup of coffee. I thanked her and walked out of the bank in a daze, the sunny San Diego afternoon feeling like a cruel joke. He had emptied it all. The entire lifetime of savings was gone. I sat in my car, the portfolio Leo had so proudly presented flashing in my mind. The glossy paper, the sleek charts showing an upward trajectory. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed fantasy built on a foundation of greed. He hadn't just made a bad investment. He had gambled with an old woman's life and he had lost. That night, I fell down a rabbit hole. I Googled quantum ape coin. The results were terrifying. It was a classic shitcoin, a token with no underlying technology or purpose, pumped up by influencers on social media. I found Reddit threads and Discord channels dedicated to it. They were filled with frantic, desperate messages from people who had lost everything. The coin had skyrocketed for a few weeks, the exact period when Leo had taken his deceptive screenshots before the anonymous. Developers had performed a rug pull, draining the liquidity pool and vanishing with millions of dollars. The coin's value had plummeted by 99.9% in a matter of hours. It was now functionally worthless. My grandmother's $780,000 had evaporated into thin air, lining the pockets of faceless internet scammers. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to grip the sides of my desk. Leo hadn't just been reckless. He had been an idiot. He'd fallen for one of the oldest scams in the new money playbook. He, the financial genius, the crypto visionary, had been played for a fool. And he had dragged our entire family down with him. I printed everything. Articles about the scam, screenshots of the coin's catastrophic price chart, horrified testimonials from other investors. I compiled it all into a neat, damning file. I was going to confront my parents, and this time, I would have irrefutable proof. I was naive enough to think that the facts would be enough. I hadn't yet grasped the true, terrifying depth of their denial, or the lengths to which Leo would go to protect his golden boy image. The war hadn't even started yet. The confrontation was a disaster. I arranged a meeting at my parents' house, the same dining room table serving as the stage for another act of our family tragedy. I laid out my evidence methodically. The bank statement showing the original balance, Patricia's confirmation of the wire transfer, the mountain of articles detailing the quantum ape coin scam. I even showed them the current value of the coin on a live tracker, a long string of zeros after the decimal point. It's all gone, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and rage. He didn't invest it. He gambled it away on a scam. My mother stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. My father just shook his head, a muscle twitching in his jaw. There must be some mistake, he mumbled. Leo is smart. He knows what he's doing. Look at the evidence. I pleaded, my voice rising. The money isn't there. The facility called because he couldn't even make the monthly payment. Just then, the door opened and Leo walked in. My parents had called him. Of course they had. He strode in with that infuriatingly confident smirk, looking from the papers on the table to my face. Well, well, he said, casually taking a seat. Clara's holding court again. What am I accused of this time? Being too successful? Don't you dare, I hissed. I know what you did. You took all of Grandma's money and threw it away on a pyramid scheme. He laughed. A genuine, full-throated laugh that echoed in the silent room. It's not a pyramid scheme, Clara. It's called decentralized finance. It's the future. You wouldn't understand. The coin is worthless, Leo. It was a rug pull. It's a temporary dip. He shot back, his voice hardening. It's called a market correction. You see a dip and you panic? I see a buying opportunity. The developers are just restructuring. They're going to relaunch even stronger. He turned to our parents, his expression softening into one of a deeply misunderstood prodigy. Mom, Dad, she's trying to sabotage this for all of us. She's always been jealous. She can't stand that I'm building generational wealth for this family while she's plugging numbers into a spreadsheet for a living. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He expertly pivoted, reframing his catastrophic failure as a temporary setback, and my valid concerns as petty jealousy. And my parents, desperate to believe in the son they had placed on a pedestal, bought every word. Clara, maybe you should listen to your brother, my mother said softly, not even looking at me. You're being hysterical. Hysterical? I was incredulous. Her money is gone. How are you not understanding this? Leo showed us the account, my father said, his voice regaining its authority. The portfolio is still worth a lot of money. The numbers go up and down. That's what investments do. That's when I realized the true depth of his deception. He hadn't just lied. He'd created an entirely fake reality. He must have been showing them a doctored account statement or a dummy portfolio. He was feeding them a fantasy, and they were devouring it because the alternative, that their brilliant son was a reckless, incompetent fool who had just vaporized their mother's life savings, was simply too horrifying to contemplate. It was completely stonewalled. He had the legal power of attorney, which meant I had no right to the financial records. He had our parents' unwavering blind support. He controlled the narrative completely. Over the next few weeks, he became untouchable. He'd answer my calls with smug condescension, telling me to educate myself on blockchain technology. He'd send texts to our parents painting me as an unhinged hysteric. Clara called again, freaking out. One text, which my mother forwarded to me, read, I'm worried about her. This obsession isn't healthy. Meanwhile, the reality of the situation was closing in. The assisted living facility sent a second letter, this one certified mail. It was a formal notice of default, stating that if the past due balance wasn't paid in full within 30 days, they would begin proceedings to discharge Eleanor from their care. Eviction. They were threatening to evict my 84-year-old grandmother with dementia. I read the letter standing in my kitchen, the world tilting on its axis. This was the consequence. Not just numbers on a screen, but a real tangible threat to her safety and well-being. I imagined her, confused and scared, being forced out of the only home she recognized. The image broke something inside me. The frustration, the helplessness, it all coalesced into a single cold point of clarity. Leo wasn't just a fool. He was cruel. His pride was more important than his own grandmother's safety. He would let her be thrown out on the street before he would ever admit he had failed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the eviction notice on the table in front of me, and felt the last vestiges of sisterly affection for Leo burn away, leaving nothing but ice and ash. He had built a fortress of lies and legal documents around himself, and my parents were his willing guards. I couldn't fight him within the family. I couldn't reason with him. So I would have to go around them. I would have to find a weapon bigger than his ego and stronger than my parents' denial. The system had given him the power to do this, and I was going to use that same system to rip it away from him. My fight was no longer just about the money. It was about saving my grandmother from the monster in our family. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a specialist, a shark. I found her through the San Diego County Bar Association website, Ms. Amelia Albright, a partner at a downtown firm with a reputation for being a bulldog in cases of financial elder abuse. Her website was filled with testimonials from people whose parents and grandparents she had saved from predatory relatives and scammers. She was exactly what I needed. I walked into her office, a sleek, Modern space on the 20th floor of a high-rise with a panoramic view of the Coronado Bridge. Ms. Albright was in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of no-nonsense competence. I had brought my file, the old bank statement, the printouts about the quantum ape coin scam, the eviction notice from the facility. I laid out the story from the beginning, my voice steady and devoid of the emotion that had choked me for weeks. I presented the facts, the timeline, the evidence. She listened intently, not interrupting once. When I finished, she steepled her fingers and looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Your brother holds a durable power of attorney, which gives him broad authority," she said, her voice crisp and precise. "And your parents, as his allies, will make this difficult. They will paint you as vindictive." "I know," I said. "I don't care. I just need to protect my grandmother. What can we do?" A small, thin smile touched her lips. "A power of attorney is not a license to steal. His primary duty is fiduciary, to act in the best interest of the principal, your grandmother. Investing her entire life savings in a high-risk, speculative digital asset is a flagrant breach of that duty. It's not just mismanagement, it's abuse." Hearing a legal expert validate my fears was like a dam breaking. "So we can fight it?" "We can do more than fight it," she said, leaning forward. "We can petition the court for an emergency temporary conservatorship. We'll ask a judge to suspend his POA immediately, freeze all the assets, and appoint you as the temporary conservator to manage your grandmother's affairs while we sort this out. But to do that, I need more than suspicion. I need irrefutable proof that he didn't just lose the money, but that he benefited from it personally. We need to show malice and self-dealing, not just incompetence." "How do I get that?" I asked. Ms. Albright's smile widened slightly. "You're an accountant, you said? You're good with numbers, with finding anomalies. So, you're going to become a forensic investigator. We need to follow the money." That meeting changed everything. I walked out of her office not as a helpless, hysterical sister, but as a woman with a mission and a plan. The vulnerability I had felt was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Amelia Albright had given me a legal roadmap, and I was going to follow it with relentless precision. My grief turned into fuel. Leo thought he was untouchable, protected by his charm and our parents' willful blindness. He had no idea what was coming for him. I dove headfirst into the murky world of cryptocurrency. I spent nights and weekends learning about blockchains, public ledgers, and wallet addresses. It was like learning a new language, but I was a determined student. I started with the one piece of information I had, the name of the exchange, Coinbase. I knew the date and the exact amount of the initial wire transfer from my grandmother's Bank of America account. My first breakthrough came from a calculated risk. I filed a police report online with the San Diego Police Department for suspected financial elder abuse. I didn't expect them to launch a full-scale investigation, but what I wanted was the official report number. With that report number, Ms. Albright was able to draft a formal subpoena to Coinbase. It was a long shot, but she argued that the potential for a criminal act necessitated their cooperation. Weeks later, we got a response. It was heavily redacted, but it contained the crucial piece of the puzzle. The wallet address to which the $780,000 worth of Ethereum, which Leo had presumably bought and then used to purchase the quantum ape coin, had been sent. That wallet address was the key. Using a public blockchain explorer, I could see the entire transaction history. It was all there, a permanent, unchangeable public record. I saw the massive influx of funds from Coinbase. I saw the transaction where he swapped the stable Ethereum for trillions of the worthless quantum ape coin. And then, I saw the rug pull, the moment the value flatlined, but I kept digging deeper into the wallet's history. And that's when I found it. It wasn't just a story of a bad investment. It was a story of theft. Sprinkled among the crypto transactions were outgoing transfers. Small at first, then larger. He was siphoning funds out, moving them back to an exchange, and presumably cashing them out into US dollars. He hadn't lost everything in the crash. He had been paying himself first. This discovery led me to the next phase of my investigation. If he was cashing out, where was the money going? I started looking at his life. The new sleek Tesla he was driving. The photos he posted on Instagram from expensive restaurants in the Gaslamp Quarter. The biggest clue came when I overheard my mother mentioning that Leo was so excited to finally be a homeowner. A homeowner? On his salary from a struggling startup? I ran a property record search in San Diego County, and there it was. Leo Vargas, owner of a one-bedroom condo in a luxury high-rise on Market Street. The purchase date was 2 months after he had taken control of Grandma's accounts. The down payment had been $150,000. I felt a surge of cold fury. He had used my grandmother's life savings, the money her husband had earned fighting fires, to buy himself a bachelor pad. While she was one late payment away from being evicted, he was living it up downtown. This was the malice. This was the self-dealing. This was the proof Ms. Albright needed. I meticulously documented every single transaction, creating a flowchart that even a child could understand. It started with Grandma Eleanor's Bank of America account, went to Coinbase, to his crypto wallet, and then branched off. One line leading to the worthless pile of Quantum Ape coin, and another, much more interesting line, leading directly to his new condo and his luxury lifestyle. I cross-referenced the dates of his cash-outs with his social media posts and credit card applications I managed to access by posing as him with the credit bureaus, citing fraud concerns. I built a fortress of evidence, brick by painstaking brick. All the while, the family dynamic was deteriorating. My parents stopped speaking to me entirely, except for the occasional guilt-laden text from my mother. "Your brother is under so much stress. You should be supporting him." Leo, sensing my persistence, grew more hostile. He left a series of threatening voicemails, calling me a bitter, jealous shrew, and warning me to back off before you regret it. I saved every single one. They were just more bricks for my wall. Finally, Ms. Albright looked over the complete file I had assembled. She nodded slowly, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "This is it," she said. "This is more than enough. He's not just a fool. He's a thief. The judge will see that." The next day, she filed the emergency petition with the San Diego Superior Court. A process server was dispatched. I imagined the moment he was served, that smug smirk finally wiped from his face as he was handed a legal summons that would bring his entire house of cards crashing down. The war was no longer being fought in the shadows or at the family dinner table. I was taking it to a place where his charm and my parents' denial meant nothing. I was taking it to court. The day of the hearing felt surreal. We were in a sterile, imposing courtroom in the Hall of Justice in downtown San Diego, a place that smelled of old paper and anxiety. I sat next to Ms. Albright at one table. My parents sat with Leo and his lawyer at another. Leo was dressed in a suit that was a size too tight, a desperate attempt to look professional and serious. He kept shooting me looks of pure hatred across the aisle. My parents just stared straight ahead, their faces pale and drawn, refusing to meet my eyes. They looked like strangers. Leo's lawyer, a cheap-looking man who seemed more suited to traffic court, went first. He tried to paint Leo as a forward-thinking grandson who had simply made a good-faith effort to grow his grandmother's assets in a volatile market. He argued that the risks were inherent to investing, and that Clara, the narrator, was motivated by a long-standing sibling rivalry. Then it was Ms. Albright's turn. She stood up, and the entire energy in the room shifted. She spoke in a calm, measured, and utterly devastating tone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She had the facts. She started by submitting the bank statement showing the initial $780,000. Then she submitted the paperwork for the power of attorney. "Your Honor," she began, "a power of attorney grants authority, but it demands a sacred trust known as fiduciary duty. The primary obligation is to preserve the principal's assets and act in their best interest. What we have here is not a case of a volatile market. It is a case of gross negligence and brazen theft. She then put up my flowchart on the courtroom monitors. It was a stark, undeniable map of Leo's betrayal. She walked the judge through it, step by step. The wire transfer of the entire life savings. The purchase of a coin she described as having all the financial legitimacy of a lottery ticket found in a gutter. She presented the articles about the rug pull. Leo started fidgeting, whispering furiously to his lawyer. My parents looked horrified, as if seeing the full picture for the first time, but Ms. Albright was just getting started. Incompetence would be one thing, Your Honor. Unfortunate, but perhaps understandable in a young man caught up in financial hype. But this goes far beyond incompetence. She clicked to the next slide, which showed the blockchain transactions of him siphoning money out of the crypto wallet. This shows a pattern of deliberate withdrawals, beginning just days after he took control of the account. She then presented the deed to his condo, the closing statement showing the $150,000 down payment. She showed the judge the lease agreement for his Tesla. She played the audio from one of his threatening voicemails to me. With every piece of evidence, Leo seemed to shrink in his chair. The confident smirk was long gone, replaced by a sheen of panicked sweat. His lawyer was shuffling papers, objecting weakly, but he was being systematically dismantled. The final blow came when Ms. Albright submitted the eviction notice from the assisted living facility. While Mr. Vargas was using his grandmother's savings to fund a life of luxury, she said, her voice ringing with cold fury. The woman he was entrusted to protect was weeks away from being thrown out of her home. That is not a failed investment strategy, Your Honor. That is a monstrous breach of trust. That is financial elder abuse. She rested her case. The judge, a stern-faced woman with zero tolerance for nonsense, looked over her glasses at my brother. Her expression was one of utter contempt. Mr. Vargas, the judge said, her voice like cracking ice. Do you have any explanation for why you used your grandmother's retirement funds to purchase a personal residence for yourself? Leo stood up, stumbling over his words. It was an investment, Your Honor, a real estate investment. The condo? It was for the family. The judge cut him off. Sit down, Mr. Vargas. I've heard enough. The ruling was swift and brutal. She granted our petition for an emergency conservatorship, effective immediately. I was appointed as the sole conservator of my grandmother's estate. Leo's power of attorney was revoked. The judge froze all of his personal bank accounts and ordered a full forensic accounting of his finances. She gave Ms. Albright the authority to place a lien on his condo and his car, the first step in clawing back every single penny he had stolen. She also referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. I looked over at my family. Leo was ashen-faced, staring into the abyss of his own making. But the look on my parents' faces was what truly broke my heart. It was a horrifying cocktail of shock, shame, and betrayal. The golden boy they had worshipped, defended, and enabled had been exposed as a common thief in a public courtroom. The carefully constructed reality they had lived in had been shattered into a million pieces, and they had no idea what to do with the rubble. In that moment, I knew the revenge was complete. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, legal, and absolute. He wasn't just ruined financially. His identity, the very core of who my parents thought he was, had been obliterated, and I had been the one to light the fuse. The end.